The isolationism was a period between the 1600s and 1800s where Japan closed itself from other cultures. This era emerged after a period of constant civil wars between clans and families. After this, peace was imposed through force by the dynasty of the Tokugawa shogunate. The effects of this forced peace was a drastic decreasing of civil wars and the creation of new officers who swore to protect the peace and ruling families, denominated as samurai. Even though the country refused to take imports from other international powers, this led to the conservation and flourishment of the Japanese culture and roots.
As Japan continued to isolate themselves from the rest of the world, the Tokugawa government began to dissipate and fragment itself as they spread to deal with domestic affairs throughout Japan and monitor their single trade hub in Nagasaki. Tokugawa Ieyasu defeated the last independent daimyo in 1600, achieving a unified state for the first time in Japan. 3 years later, he was declared shogun by Emperor Hideyoshi. His family ruled from 1603 until 1868, and during that time he issued several edicts, one of which aimed to close the country of Japan from almost all foreign trade. This closed country policy was known as sakoku.
It was difficult for the Tokugawa government to maintain the policy of sakoku. Since trade was limited to one port once per year, they had to be quite a bit of security around it, and the closed ports constantly to be completely sure that their policy was to remain effective. Besides smugglers trying to sneak in goods and trade underneath the government, Jesuits were still trying to get in to convert the Japanese, and they were very persistent. The government had tasked themselves with regulating the currency and its distribution of currency, as well as preventing other currencies from being used within Japan to further discourage trade with other countries and encourage Japan to become more self-sufficient. They were all pressured to trade with several nations, and eventually this pressure is what led to the downfall of the Tokugawa government and the collapse of the sakoku policy.
Finally, on July 8, 1853, 4 steamboats led by Commodore Perry landed at Edo Bay, and since the Japanese had never seen these boats before, so they thought they were giant dragons puffing smoke. The Japanese government realized that their country was in no position to defend itself against a foreign power, and Japan could not retain the isolation without risking war. On March 31, 1854, after weeks of long and tiresome talks, Perry received what he had so dearly worked for, a treaty with Japan. This treaty opened trade in Japan, created a new peace between the US and Japan, opened new ports to trade in Shimoda and Hokkaido, and made Japan agree to provide help and protection for American ships that wrecked on Japanese coast.